When a community dares to stay faithful for 70 years through scarcity and loss, what if the real kingdom story God keeps writing in the Langley Christian School community is that He has worked through ordinary people and called the community into something much greater than they could ever see or realize within their own generation? This is a story about God's faithfulness in the Langley Christian School community's 70-year history. It's a story about unlikely change due to the sacrificial generosity of families that have always been called to think about how their decisions would set up future generations to experience God's abundant faithfulness. It's about a community that has experienced loss during times of challenge, unmet expectations, and disappointments, but a story about God who has been faithful. It was started by immigrant families that didn't have very much, but they had a bigger kingdom vision of what God could do. So this is the story of God's enduring faithfulness across generations at Langley Christian School. Join us through this series as we'll explore how the Langley Christian of 1955 became the school of 2025 and beyond. You'll hear stories from people across the past 70 years that have shaped generations of followers. For those in our community that have been here for decades, we invite you to look back and see what God has done. And for those listening, we invite you to become a part of a story of new families God is calling into our community for His glory. So this is an origin story, and it's a story of change. If we forget to tell our origin stories, we lose sight of God's faithfulness. There are deep roots in this community of God's work, and you'll hear different voices that hosted some of these conversations with me. Adam Wolders, our head of school. Doug Jensen, director of finance and long-serving staff member. And Lisa Smith, development director. Each have had their lives transformed by sending their kids to Langley Christian School and serving as current staff members. We are inviting families called into our community into this story of God's unfolding faithfulness and of change. The story of a school of over 1,400 students began with a small school sown in the seeds of a relational community. It was a small but steadily growing Fraser Valley community shaped by open fields, straight roads, tightly knit communities, and a whole lot of mud roads. The place basically ran on dairy barns, berry fields, and families who could fix almost anything with baling wire. Geographically, it felt wide. This low Fraser Valley bowl had rivers and rain and soil that were always in charge, no matter what humans thought they were planning. Daily life moved at the pace of a rural town, and where the land and the seasons of farming rhythms framed much of the community's identity. In 1953, the Langley Christian School Society membership met to form the school. In February of 1954, the society started with $75.34 in its bank account. Churches in the Netherlands were asked to hold a collection in support of the new emerging school. And Mr. J.M. DeVeist moved from Ontario to serve as principal and teach the 17 students. These immigrant families came over from the Netherlands and tried to create a life of faith and community for their families. Listen for what drew these families together and for some of the initial seeds of generosity and sacrifice that God was planting in their families' lives for generations to come.
The movement goes way back even to my parents and their parents, because I was born in the Netherlands. I went to Christian school there, and my mother used to tell me how when Christian school started in the Netherlands, she would go to school every Monday with an envelope of money, and so those roots are even deeper than Canada.
Here, yeah.
So then all these immigrants who went to Christian schools there came to Canada and decided they needed to start Christian education. Whether they had money or not, they did it.
That was Willie Vanderhook. We'll introduce you to her and her family later in the episode. And the school society was founded in 1953 and led by board chair Ike Rusticus. We spoke with his daughter Grace Muller and she shared what it was like to be part of the first LCS class.
I'm Grace Rusticus Muller, and have been involved with the school since it started. In 1955, I was a grade 5 student when they started the school.
When I spoke to Grace, she named all the students in the first class in 1955 by just looking at an old photo that we had from our archives.
There was only 11 of us.
That's still...
And 6 of them were the teachers' kids.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, who do you remember?
Henry, Trudy, Mimi, Leo, Rhea, and Enika DeFeist, John and Fran Helder, Grace, Helen, and Joanna Rusticus, and Gary Postma.
It was the start of something new, and it wasn't all sunshine and smooth sailing the whole way. I asked Grace Muller what it was like to be a student at Langley Christian in the 1950s. Grace got in trouble quite a bit, except her dad was the board chair, which must have made for some pretty tricky school politics.
That first year, from a student's point of view, or from a parent's point of view, would have been quite different.
Okay.
But from a student's point of view, we started out with 17, but a couple of families left, so we ended up with 12 by the end of the school year. 6 of the kids were the teachers. Sorry, there was only one teacher who did 8 grades from 12 kids. So whether that was really quality education is debatable, but there was a real desire for kids to learn from a faith-based perspective.
These families sacrificed to ensure that their kids could grow in faith.
My parents were very committed to faith-based living, and Christian school, Christian education for their children was very important. For 2 years before Langley Christian opened, when they were working on it, my mom drove from Langley to Abbotsford Christian School every morning and every night, down what was then Fraser Highway. There was no freeway. Took her 3 girls, plus several other kids, every day for 2 years. They were a group of parents that had a vision, and they did it.
Let's introduce you to another one of those original students and families at Langley Christian School. We spoke with Sam Wind, who attended the original Langley Christian School site in the late 1950s and early 60s. This is Sam introducing himself to our listeners and a bit of context as one of the first students at Langley Christian School.
My name is Sam Wind. I came to Langley in 1956 with our family, and I've been in Langley ever since, and hope to be here for a while yet. I had fond memories of going there, grade 1 to 7, and at that point, that's as far as Langley Christian went. I remember my father had a van, which he was the first bus driver for the school, and he would drive around many rural parts of Langley and bring the students into the school. The campus was small. There were multiple grades in one room, type of thing where as a student you're thinking, oh, this is normal. This is, our playground was maybe about, I would say, half an acre. All the students played there. We had a baseball diamond with, I think, neighbors had more balls in their yard than they probably would appreciate. Most of them were understanding, others not so much. So we walked to school, we walked back to Langley Center to get picked up after school. Sometimes we walked as far as Murrayville. Right?
Sam's father, John, was one of those original families that had been a part of starting the school.
If I go back further to my father, he spent quite a few years on the Langley School Board. When it was in the small campus in Langley Christian and then up to Shannon Heights. And so our family was involved right from the get-go. Every fall we had a bazaar, which was held in the Murrayville Hall, and many fond memories of going there and spending a a whole day there. So then it basically culminated in an auction in the evening, and yeah, that was times where, you don't forget about where you were, and, how many people came together, and people came with one major goal, and that was to raise funds for Langley Christian, and that was always such a thing which was embedded in my mind right from the time I was small.
Grace spoke about what it took for those founding families to follow faithfully in God's plan for the school.
They were a group of parents that had a vision, and they did it. They had no idea where this was going to go. They just knew that this was something they had to do, because they didn't know where it was going to go. And then the first year was not encouraging, because they started with 17 students. One family withdrew, probably because the quality of education may not have been the best.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to start somewhere. Everybody was poor anyway, so there weren't any, like today's world, we have your haves and your have-nots as far as financially goes, and there's a big gap there. Those days, everyone was poor. Nobody had anything.
Here's how Sam Wind experienced his time at Langley Christian School.
So all my siblings went through Langley Christian, so I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, right? So, and they all attended from the times, various times, going back to 1957 up to, when my sister Marion was a bit younger. So she graduated from Langley Christian probably, I would say, in the 1969, 70, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
It was basically a small double classroom. So there's 2 classrooms there. The one on the left side was grade 3 and 4, and time I attended, and then on the right side was grade 5, 6, and 7. So 2 classrooms with 1 hall at the back, and the rest were all desks, one going to the left, the other one to the right, and yeah, that's a time I remember quite well.
Yeah.
And, we had probably 2 teachers, so we would have been 1 teacher for each class, and then in the annex of the church they had grades 1 and 2. So most of the time we spent in there was, it was education. There weren't a lot of extras. There wasn't a lot of field trips and that type of thing. It was, usually 5 days a week, and it was entire day was spent on doing schoolwork. And my wife would say, "How do you remember that story or the Bible story?" And I said, "I still remember the Bible story hanging from a long sheet, which would have the picture of what the Bible story is, creation, Noah's Ark. And I can still visually see that picture on the front blackboard as he would bring it down every time we had a different Bible story. And it just seems to be embedded in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
You know the stories of the Bible. And it's amazing how that impacts your life as you go further along. So that's very very impactful for me. I do remember that a lot.
The conditions weren't always what we see today in our state-of-the-art facilities with bright classroom windows. Grace shared about what it was like to attend school in the basement room of the consistory of the Christian Reformed Church.
To be a student when your teacher has 8 grades and you're in a church pew with this homemade desk in front of you, which has 2 hooks that clip over the pew in front of you so that you're sitting on a bench, but at least you've got a desk to work on. And those desks were put in every Sunday evening and taken out every Saturday because church had to be held in there. Then later on, and if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to go outside over the driveway. The pastor's house was next door, and they put a bathroom in his garage. So the school kids could go to the bathroom in the garage. You were given your assignments. There was very little equipment. I read the budget for the first year when I was looking this paper over, and I went, oh, that was right. They had cash on hand of $518, spent $700 on blackboards, books, and a 1 toilet washroom, leaving a deficit of $181. The proposed budget was $25.50. with $2,400 going for the teacher's salary, $100 for books, and $50 for miscellaneous. And that doesn't sound like anything right now, but in those days, that was a lot of money, and nobody had any.
These families lived within their limitations to make it possible for their children to attend the school. And God provided for these families as these families created community together.
The families that started, my dad was one of them, that started the school, they really sacrificed. They just didn't have anything. And I can remember one time the teacher had to be paid and there wasn't enough money in the school treasury. So one of the things that happened was my dad gave the grocery money to the school. And my mom was quite upset because we had a family to feed. But I don't remember ever going hungry. So how they resolved that, I don't know, because we were children, and children in those days were not always given all the family information. But the students created a bond among themselves. It didn't matter if you were boys or girls, young, in grade 2 or 5 or 8. They played together. They worked together. And the parents did the same thing. They worked together.
Grace's historical work has served as an anchor for some of the research we conducted while putting this podcast series together. You heard Grace share in 1955 that there was $518.33 cash on hand, and expenses were $700 in the first year, leaving the Langley Christian School Society with a deficit of $181.77. These families didn't have much, but what they lacked in money, they made up in faith. Mr. Device was the first principal and teacher in 1955. In 1957, the school was a 2-room building that was used until 1970. In 1957, the enrollment continued to grow under Mr. Brune, who commuted from Linden in Washington to work every day. In 1958, enrollment reached 60 students and the Mothers Club was formed. Sam shared that it was a struggle for these families. It was 17 students, a single classroom, and a faith that refused to shrink in the face of scarcity. From the field trips to Cultus Lake to the choir performances, the school kept growing throughout the 1960s. Until in 1969, the school had reached 80 students. The Langley Christian School Society purchased a property on Highway 10 and 56th Avenue. Many families ended up moving to the Cloverdale area just to make it work. The school officially changed its name to Shannon Heights Christian. Grace Muller shared about this monumental moment in Langley Christian's story.
But the school is still a Montessori school back there.
Yeah.
And we outgrew that one, and then it became up on Shannon Hill, so they changed it to Shannon Heights for a while.
Yeah, tell us where they got that name and why Shannon Heights?
Because it's built on top of the hill that belonged to a Mr. Shannon. And the area was well known for him, so they called it after him.
Let's go back to the conversation we had with Willie Vanderhook and her daughter Margaret Kuntz and her daughter Laura Volkerts. They'll describe what it was like for these families and the calling God placed on their hearts to continue expanding the mission.
They did have a little school behind this church, Christian Reformed Church, which the building is still there, not the school. So they needed to expand, obviously, and so all of us who belonged to that church were paid a visit and said, could you all borrow $1,000 on your own account? Because we can get this property for, I believe it was $60,000 for that property. Mm-hmm. So.
And how did families respond there, Willie?
Everyone did it, almost everyone. We had enough money to pay. I believe them. I'd have nothing to do with the bookkeeping, but there was enough money there to buy the property.
And then they had to do it again for the building,
And then
right?
a few years later, they did it again and said that school with a lot of free labor from everybody would probably cost us $60,000, and could you do it again?
This is a really critical inflection point, and there'll be a few times where we jump to the future just for a brief moment to breathe in and to breathe out and to be reminded of God's faithfulness so that we can catch a vision of what might be happening already today. Here's Adam Wolders, our current Langley Christian School head of school, that's going to help us understand what this means today.
Those of us who've come, like our family came in 2014, we're aware that the phrase I've been using is that we are drinking from wells that we did not dig, and we're reaping from fields that we did not sow. And there's all these generations before us that created this opportunity that our families are blessed by. And that is such an inspirational thing for us, I think a motivator for us, my family in particular, about, well, we need to do that for our children's generation and our grandchildren's generation so that Christian schools continue to be a blessing to others.
For sure.
It's so neat to see when you learn more about the story that at every intersection where the people who made up Langley Christian were called to make it a little bit bigger, they rose to the challenge and everybody came together to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we sat down with Willie Vanderhook to hear about the founding families of Langley Christian School, Willie's daughter Margaret Kunst, who attended Shannon Heights, was also there in that conversation. We asked Margaret about her experiences as a student at Shannon Heights.
Most of my memories started from grade 5. I have some memories of grade 1 and 2, and but mostly when the new principal came, I had I just felt like it shifted the direction of our school, because I was saying to you earlier about, we had our first musical, and that was just not something that we had done before. And I think it really kind of brought our school together. And then grade 6 and 7, it was just small classes. Hot dog days, I think my mom would remember rolling newspapers for extra money, remember, to raise money.
Yeah. And before that, the ladies would have bake sales. You have to remember there was no funding.
Right.
This is
Yeah, before the Independent School Act.
yeah, there was no funding from the government at all. So it was.
But I remember hot dog days and you guys rolling papers for however much money you could get from rolling newspapers.
We found an article in our archives written in Dutch that dated back to October of 1970. It was about the Shannon Heights opening. We asked Willie to help translate the article. Here are a couple clips that we strung together to get a gist of the article and the monumental moment for Langley Christian School and Christian schooling in the Fraser Valley.
9 oktober, getuige van de Shannon Heights Christian School te Surrey. Burgemeester Wim van der Zam verklaarde het gebouw officieel geopend. They're just saying the mayor of Surrey was asked to officially open.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
The beautiful, prachtige, right?
Yeah, the beautiful square.
Met opening van het 4 lokalen tellende schoolgebouw dat vrijwel geheel door de leden zelf is gebouwd. So that was saying that it was pretty much built by all the members, right? It was pretty much built by the members of the school society.
9,400
94 square feet groot is behalve except 4 lokalen en een halve basement.
Half a basement.
In 1970, there were 87 students enrolled at Shannon Heights Christian. By 1974, that number had nearly doubled to 154. In 1975, Margaret Terpstra was elected as the first female board member. The school was in good hands. It was cared for by people like George Temenga, who cared for the facilities. In 1977, British Columbia recognized that faith-based schools could serve the public good. They introduced partial government funding that legitimized the role of Christian independent schools and made Christian education more accessible to even more families. This shift, later formalized in the 1989 Independent School Act, transformed Christian schools from the margins into trusted educational partners with families and with the wider society, balancing public accountability with the freedom to live out faith and mission in the world. However, in 1981, with all that momentum, something needed to change. Families wanted to continue sending their kids to Shannon Heights, but the Shannon Heights campus was bursting at its seams, and the facility designed for 200 students would no longer meet their current capacity needs. You'll need to tune into our next episode to hear what God has placed on these families' hearts to see the mission continue to expand in 1981. We asked some of our guests what it has meant to see God's faithfulness continue across generations. Here's what Grace Muller shared with us.
I don't think it was always about the big things God did. It was about his faithful walk and support of people as they went. You know, sometimes we look for great and glorious things God's doing, and we forget that he is so present in the day-to-day activities and struggles that we all go through, whether it's a school or personal or whatever, that constant, quiet faithfulness of God, I think is much more evident than the big things. You know, to get 1,000 people to take out a personal loan, which the school secured because they needed to build something. $1,000 in that day was a whopping amount of money. But that constant faithfulness, yep, I'm with you. You know, if this is the right thing to do, it will work out. I think once in a while there might have been a situation or two where boards or committees made a decision that might not have been the wisest and didn't work. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. That's what you learn. You learn from your mistakes. Mm-hmm. You know, in the early parents too, they realized, yes, they were starting a Christian school, but the quality of the education needs to improve. But then as time, so that's what they focused on. The quality improved so well that became the focus, and they kind of forgot the community part of it. And then you refocus and carry on.
There was uncertainty about the future of the school, but it was part of God's unfolding plan for Langley Christian School.
Yeah, there are definitely some times when there's some issues, and it's like a lot of people sort of decided we're done with this, but there was enough people to say we're hanging in here. And definitely over the years we've had issues for sure.
When were some of those moments, Willie?
Yeah, it's a little hard. I don't really want to go into it because it's over, but you know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think I recall, you know, whenever you're at the board level and you have to make decisions, it's no different than any other organization where you have to steer the ship. And maybe there's some people that don't agree with the direction. And I think those are the struggles that when you emerge from that and you see, you know, again, you're talking about God's faithfulness, that, I mean, I think there probably isn't one board where they haven't had to make difficult decisions. And then once you've made that decision, this is the direction. And then I believe God blesses that, because this is, you know, like, maybe things could have been different or better or whatever, but we're not perfect human beings, and we're doing the best that we can. And I think, you know, the struggles that Mom's talking about, because they were very close to steering the ship. And so some of those things were really difficult, but I'm pretty sure that there were probably a lot of people that maybe weren't involved in that and just had faith in the process and the direction that, you know, the school was going. And I mean, you probably have your own stories of, of maybe the difficult times, but also of the blessing from getting through.
This is a community that needs to hear about stories of the past because they continue to speak into our present experiences. They lead us to refocus on God's faithfulness. And throughout these conversations we were having with our guests, I couldn't help but notice how God's faithfulness kept playing out in these families' lives over and over again. Here's Grace explaining how God kept bringing her family back into this community of faith, decade after decade.
So first I got to go to Grandparents' Day because I was a committee member. Then I got to go to Grandparents' Day to push my mother's wheelchair. Then I got to go to Grandparents' Day because I was a grandparent. And our next generation of family were students at Langley Christian, and they've all graduated now. Last one graduated 2 years ago, so I haven't been here in 2 years. And now my great-granddaughter starts next year.
Here's Grace reading her dad, Ike Rusticus, first Langley Christian School Society board member's blessing that was included in the 25-year anniversary celebration.
A small group of immigrant parents felt the need for Christian education very strongly, so they joined hearts and hands together in faith started a school in September 1955. It was then called Langley Christian School. This was a difficult decision because we did not have the means to do it. No one did. But trusting in the provision of the Lord, and after much prayer, the school opened in Langley with only a small amount of children and one teacher in the back room of our church. Many times we said with the psalmist, "Except the Lord builds this school, we will labor in vain." But our Heavenly Father has always provided and supplied our needs abundantly. It is with praise to God and thanksgiving in our hearts that we join together for the celebration of the 25th anniversary of our school. Ike Rusticus, my dad. You could actually use these same words for any anniversary now, because those truths are still true. Whatever we try to do, unless God blesses that, it's not going to work, or there'll be some sort of an issue, or you're working for nothing. But God provides our needs. I find that interesting because God always provides and supplies our needs abundantly. That does not mean He supplies all of our wants.
Except the Lord builds the school, we labor in vain.
Your root is living, teaching, and practicing a faith-based life in the decisions made. What's the reason for why are we making this? To honor God or ourselves? It's about, okay, how does this action or decision honor God?
Langley Christian School has always been built on the sacrificial generosity of families. We know that God doesn't bless us because we give, but God works with the blessing that He has given.
Well, I tell my children also, we were immigrants, and I remember everything, but we didn't have any money because whatever you had in the old country, you weren't allowed to sell and take your money because Europe was very poor after the war. So my dad sold everything, started with nothing here. But I still remember the first Sunday we went to church, we still all got our nickel and dime to put in the collection plate. That's the foundation of this thing, right?
Yeah, this culture of giving and what it takes through
being
sacrifice.
taught to give, and I find now it's too bad that we now give differently, because there's something about each child getting their quarter or whatever to give, because then they know that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
That act is kind of sacred, right? Just
Yeah.
putting it into the plate.
Yeah, no
When
matter
you
how
lost
little
something.
you had, you still always, and that's how our churches started, and that's how the school started. What you're doing today is so important for, one decision. There's a fork in the road, it can make all the difference, right?
And I think going back to that obedience piece, when you feel God calling you sort of to do something, and maybe you don't really know if you can do it or if it's, but you just like, this is, I think we're on that path, and God will find a way. And it's true. It wasn't always easy for us to come up with tuition. It just wasn't. But somehow we always did. And that's something I think that I hope the people coming in now, yeah, it's expensive, but so are a lot of things that you put your money to, and you find a way to do it. So it's hard for people sometimes. I don't want to just dismiss the fact that, it is expensive, but it's somehow you find a way, and and I think there's other ways for people who don't have the means.
It was wonderful to sit together with 3 generations of a Langley Christian School family. 4, if you count Laura's oldest son, Freddie, who was in kindergarten at the time we recorded, just sitting right next door. It was humbling. We looked at a 25-year anniversary celebration booklet of Shannon Heights, and in there was a blessing written by Laura's grandfather, Ted, who is Willie's husband, who is Margaret's father, and Ted had passed away about 2 years ago. Here's Laura reading the blessing from her grandfather, Ted. Listen for the seeds of a school that was going to continue to live even more into God's unfolding faithfulness in the decades and ages ahead.
What language can we borrow to thank our God for his abiding faithfulness towards us? What words of gratitude could be expressed to thank him for the faith of our fathers? 25 years of service in Christian education in our community is cause for celebration indeed. And we have good reason to look to the future with great anticipation. With the groundwork now being done for a new school, may the faith of our forefathers not have diminished. Look to the future, reflect upon the past, cast your eyes heavenward, and hear the Almighty say, "Be still and know that I am God." Sincerely, Ted Vanderhook.
My dad.
My grandpa.
He spent so much time on it.
As Langley Christian School opened its doors at the elementary property on 50th Avenue with 8 classrooms, a gym, kitchen, and library, we follow the literal and figurative plot lines of our elementary and middle and high campuses in these next 2 episodes as we reflect on the story of a school that continued to grow in 1982 from 185 students to 700 students in 1999 with its first grade 12 graduation class of 34 students. Students no longer had to shuttle over to Linden or Fraser Valley Christian. The families wanted to ensure that students received a quality education that did not compromise on faith. God continued to expand the mission. As the school returned to its original name of Langley Christian, in our next episode, we'll hear from voices such as Principal and Superintendent Leo Smith talk about Langley Christian in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the struggles it faced to find new space, and how it would keep the legacy alive. You'll also hear from Wilma Van Brumlin, one of the legendary kindergarten teachers that have graced our hallways. This is part of the story that you won't want to miss. How did Shannon Heights Christian return back to Langley Christian? How did God show up in the most unlikely ways? And then how did God continue to guide families and leaders through the struggles of expansion, space, and legacy? And what choices would shape the next generation of families called to the school? As the school was running out of space, you'll hear more in our next episode about the true cost of legacy and expansion. And Langley Christian School would move closer to its current location, but not without this cost. What did the leaders and families do to preserve the legacy? And who would rise to shape the next generation? How would the community adapt faithfully through its pressure to grow? And would it remain faithful in expansion? Who else would God bring into the community to remind us of the faith of the founders? Tune in to our next episode to catch a vision of God's faithfulness throughout the 80s and 90s and across generations. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. This episode was written by Kevin Merchandani and produced by Ralph Alvaro.